Welcome to the DIY Wealth Canada podcast, a show by independent investors for independent investors. Join hosts Bob and Nelson as they discuss investing, personal finance, and much more, all from a fiercely self-reliant Canadian perspective. As a reminder, nothing you're about to hear is investment advice. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the DIY Wealth Canada podcast. I'm Bob and with my co-host Nelson. And today we're going to talk about hedging your consumption. It's a fun episode that we're recording. Nelson, what did you have in mind?
This is a concept that I'm not going to say has driven how I invest, but certainly influenced how I invest. So basically what I did is I took a look at what I spent my money on and I made investment decisions sort of based on that. So what I mean is that every month I spend money on power and on gas and on water and filling up my car with gas, different kind of gas, insurance. I have insurance on my car, I have insurance on my house, and so on. And so looking at these costs that I have, and I know that every month for the rest of my life, I'm likely going to have most of these costs that are going to leave my wallet and into someone else's wallet. And if that's the case, and if it's very predictable that this is going to happen, then maybe I should get a piece of that. And not necessarily directly, but more indirectly. That I want to, if I pay the gas company $100, then I want to get a small portion of that back as a dividend or as earnings from the gas company. And then, of course, I get a portion of everyone else's gas bill as well because I'm that small proportionate owner. So basically what I wanted to do is lock in the ability to pay for these utilities with similar investments in the underlying companies. And that would protect my spending from inflation and all those nasty things that pop up, because ultimately all these companies are doing is just passing through cost increases to customers. So that was the thought process there. And it really sort of ballooned at that point to, there's all sorts of kind of interesting avenues we can go down where we can talk about, how much, whether there's certain types of industries that you might want to not invest in, and so on. So it's an exciting episode, and I think it's a really good concept that will help out a lot of people who do listen. I don't think that this is a strategy that it's quite simple, and so simple strategies tend to be scoffed at because they're so simple that people assume that they don't work. But I think this is one that will work quite effectively for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when we were talking about this topic, I basically asked you what you want to talk about. And when you started mentioning it, I was like, oh yeah. Like that's exactly how we invest it, right? Just, invest in companies that make products that you use on a daily basis. And I'll take it to a next level. If you absolutely hate dealing with these companies, be better. We're talking about, your cable company, your internet service provider, or cell phone companies, or, products that you rely on, even banks, right? Some people hate dealing with their banks, but they use their banks despite all that pain they have to go through, right? So the more you hate these companies, but you absolutely need to rely on their products, the better. And that's definitely one way we model our investment portfolio after. Invest in, like what you said, Nelson, things that you use. So we get gas from Fortis, BC. So we own some Fortis shares. Use Telus for my cell phone. I absolutely hate dealing with Telus because they tend to overcharge me and I have to call them regularly to get my cell phone bill lowered. So why not invest in Telus and vice versa? Banks too, right? I put money in my bank so I don't get charged these monthly fees, but no, why not? But it's hard for me to switch banks, so why not invest in banks? So, Nelson, did you want to expand on the idea a little bit more?
I love the rage angle of it, because you're absolutely right. If you're looking at a telecom company or utility or whatever, and yeah, a lot of people listening, I think, go through this. My wife, she handles all of the day-to-day bills in our house, and she goes through the utility bills line by line by line and just gets upset with all of the fees that just get passed on to us, the consumer. And I just look at it and it's like, man, everybody in Canada hates paying their electric bill because of all those fees. I don't know of a single person who looks at their electric bill and says, hey, this is great. Like, look at all these things that I'm supporting. A plus. No, everyone hates it. Everyone hates it so much. And I just sit back and collect a small portion of those payments, and I just love it. That rage, we're all going to have it. We all think that we pay too much for whatever it is when it comes to electricity, gas, insurance, you name it. Like, I mean, who wants their insurance to go up? Nobody. So if you own a piece of the power company, if you own a piece of the gas company, and that might not be directly possible. I live in Edmonton. Our power and our gas utility is owned by the city of Edmonton. So there's no way that I can invest in it. I mean, maybe if I pay my property taxes, I sort of invest in it, but no, because I'm not getting any money back. So I can't invest in this directly. But Bob, I can invest in Fortis, which delivers your natural gas. I can invest in Enbridge, which delivers natural gas all across Ontario and into New Brunswick. Now, they made an acquisition a few years ago. I can invest in that, and that's good enough. You know, like, it's not going to be direct, but it's the gas company in Edmonton and the gas company in Ontario are going to have to deal with the same pressures when it comes to replacing pipes or whatever. So I think that the important thing is to sort of switch your mindset and say, if this annoys me, that it's probably something that's a pretty good investment, and I should concentrate on putting my money, not concentrate, but put some of my money into that and reap the benefits of millions and millions of Canadians who hate paying that bill every single month. That just, it creates a different mentality around paying your bills, which I think is incredibly important for your mental health, ultimately.
For sure. And the beauty is that, once you own enough shares of certain stock, and when you actually get more dividends than how much you pay them, you're like, oh, this is awesome. So it just totally shifts your mentality a little bit. And I would take one step further. It's not just about your consumption, but you could look around and see what other people are consuming. So one really good example would be, look at what cell phones other people are using, or including your own. I know a lot of people use iPhone, and they seem to be stuck on the Apple ecosystem. So why not investing in Apple stock? Or if you use an Android phone, why not own Alphabet, the company behind Google? So it becomes very simple to find names of companies that you might want to invest in. Now, we're not saying that, just look at these companies and then invest your money right away. Definitely do your research, but that will get you started. And again, the harder it is to switch these products, the better, right? Because there's almost like that. It's not loyalty per se, but it's almost that stickiness. And you look at banks. Sure, people could switch banks, but it's a pain in the ass to have to switch banks. If you have direct deposit, you have to change that with your employer. If you have recurring monthly payments, you have to change that, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, not many people change their bank like regularly. People usually stick around for many, many years, unless something really like bad happens and people get pissed off and then switch the banks. But you almost never hear people switching banks like every second month or every half year. So it's a very simple concept. And that I think the simpler these investment concepts are, the better, because then you don't have to look at the complicated charts or, sure, you could look into the financial data, but I like to see things from sort of higher level in terms of the initial assessment of companies. And then once I figure out, hey, is this company good enough to invest in, then you could dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think that the financial world wants people to believe that they are not smart enough to make financial decisions on their own, and that they'd better just let a expert make those decisions for them, and of course pay the expert quite well for their time, whether that's a investment fee or it's by per hour or whatever. That's what the investment industry wants you to believe. And what this concept is saying is that you don't need to be that smart in order to enjoy a little bit of an edge over other investors. Peter Lynch is very famous. Peter Lynch, of course, a famous investor. This is one of his big tips, or whatever you want to call it, for DIY investors, is that, look, if you love a company, if you love a product, and you understand what makes it unique over other products, then you have an edge there. And it may not be the biggest edge or whatever, but you still have an edge there. You have the ability to understand a product better than the average person does. And, Bob used the example of the iPhone or Google or whatever, and maybe not in those scenarios as much because, I think everybody has an opinion on which phone is best. But if you look at something maybe a little bit more niche, not that Apple or Google have been bad investments. I mean, if you use that strategy, your portfolio ended up doing just fine, in fact, better than just fine. You did really well. I think it's more of a little bit more niche where you can identify something that maybe not a lot of other investors can identify, whether it's a smaller chain of stores where you can say, hey, I understand what these guys are doing, and I'm not sure that a lot of other people understand it, or, a product that you love, a technology that you use. There's all sorts of different examples that you can gain an edge on the experts by doing that. And that's going to help your investment portfolio. But at the same time, with Bob, what you're saying is that do the research, make it a small bet. Don't make it a huge part of your portfolio and so on, just in case you're wrong. But I do think that this is a path that it's simple and it gets ridiculed because it's so simple, but I think there's something to it. I think that people should perhaps put a little bit more weighting into this than they might do because it is simple, but it works.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Peter Lynch. I could be wrong, but I think one of the examples he had was in investing in Gap, the clothing company. And I believe, I could be wrong, he wasn't 100% sure about the company until he learned more from his daughter, who was shopping at Gap, and all her friends were shopping at Gap, and they were just so attracted to the brand. And he was like, "Oh, this is like a company to invest in," because that was the attraction for teenagers. So, yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of edge per se if you know a company well by consuming the products. So it gives you may have some edge over other people, and because of this edge, you could do well by investing in this company or a few handfuls of companies.
Yeah, too. I think that getting back to that hedging your consumption sort of theme is if you find that you're going to the Gap or you're going to wherever kind of over and over again, if you're consuming that product, then owning the stock also helps pay for some of that consumption of that product. And, Gap, you could argue there that something like the Gap, well, it's a discretionary thing and you might not be That's an easy thing to cut down when the economy tanks or whatever. So it's not maybe a perfect comparison, but I think it's still pretty good. And two is it's that mentality that you own shares of the Gap, you go to the store, you buy stuff, and you think, hey, this is, like I'm helping out myself. And I'll use the example of I own shares in A&W. And I bought those shares because I think that they're good operators. I like the marketing. I like the focus on sort of higher quality ingredients, a little bit higher quality fast food. The onion rings, of course, are delicious. But all of those things sort of wrapped up into a package. What I really like about it is that I can go and every time I get a teen burger is I get dividends back into my account. So what I would tell people, and back when I worked at an office and we'd go for lunch, every Friday we'd go for lunch, and every Friday, where are we going to go for lunch? And I'd say A&W because dividends taste delicious. And then that got, the discussion going and whatever. And of course, we would never go to A&W because everyone would bug me that that was my suggestion every week. But owning the shares, it created this whatever in my mind that it's like, I want to go there and I want to eat my dividends because dividends are delicious. And it just, it turned something that might have been a bit of a chore into something that was more fun because I got to own the stock. So that's, I don't know, that's just fun to look at it that way. And I think that's part of the reason why I like this concept so much is because it turns investing into something very boring into something maybe a little bit more exciting and a little bit more fun.
Yeah, and I think it gives you a little bit of insight to the company too. For example, we own Costco in our dividend portfolio, and I always enjoy going to Costco, even though it is a gong show inside and outside, like with the parking lot and in the warehouses where people leave their buggies in the middle of the aisle, and it's always painful. But every single time I've been to Costco, it's always busy. And as a shareholder, I'm like, this is great. Like, this is awesome. Like, Costco is making so much money and gaining a lot of membership. So again, if you use something, this consuming investing idea, it's simple, but it's quite genius actually.
Yeah, you get that powerful source or powerful jolt of confirmation every time you go in that, hey, look, this place is busy. They're continuing to sell rotisserie chickens. The toilet paper's flying off the shelf. Everyone's here with their carts and the parking lot's jammed. It's just every single time you go in, it's telling you that you've made the right choice. And that can foster that long-term mentality. Bob, how long have you owned Costco shares, and has that helped that where you look at it every time you go in and you get that confirmation and you say, hey, like I'm going to keep owning these for a while? Is that something that's helped there?
Oh, for sure. I think we must own it maybe not quite close to 10 years, but at least, over 5 years for sure. We owned it before COVID. So yeah, it's always interesting, and it's just reinforces that idea that Costco is doing well. Because what's the number one thing people complain about Costco is like, oh, I spend another $400 or I spend $1,000, right? Like I do the same too. It's like go to a Costco trip and it's like, oh, $300-400, and you're wondering like, geez, I didn't buy that much stuff. Like, how did the bill end up being so much? And it's kind of no brainer every year the membership is up for renewal. You just kind of do it automatically. Even now, they, instead of having to go to the memberships counter, they just say, oh, they could just add it onto your bill. So you can just do it at the counter when you check out. So they're making this membership renewal process as simple as they can. So you're kind of don't even need to do extra things. And again, as a Costco shareholder, it's awesome seeing how busy the warehouses are and how many people are shopping, and their baskets are always filled and long lineups and so on. So you could apply this to almost every single company that you consume, and it gives you an idea. And and you could observe how the company is doing, right? Take Apple, for example. Whenever we walk by an Apple store, I kind of pop my head in to see how many people are in the store and look at, sort of kind of browse around their new product just to give me an idea whether Apple is still dominating or not in the market. So again, as an investor, you don't really need to look into their quarterly results or annual reports. You could just go into these stores and kind of look around and get a feel about how the company is doing. Obviously, it's not. I wouldn't rely 100% on that, but it gives you a good sense.
I think it gives you that just sort of jolt every time you go in, every time you walk by of, hey, I made the right decision. Perfect. Now I don't have to worry about this for another 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And I think that's a incredibly powerful thing that is just simple, and simple almost always gets discounted. It's like that midwit meme. We've all seen that meme on Twitter or whatever, where you have the like IQ test bell curve, where you have like the really low IQ on the left, really high IQ on the right, and then in the middle where everyone is. And there's a meme always. The meme is always, both the really stupid people and the really smart people are sort of thinking about things the same way. And that's kind of the strategy, is that it seems stupid, but it's really not. That it's just simple. And I think simple is smart in this scenario, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. So let me pivot maybe a little bit here, and I want to talk about hedging your consumption with oil, because we all drive cars, at least most of us drive cars, and that's maybe not a major expense, but I mean, I'm paying probably close to $100 a month in gas, and admittedly, I don't drive very much or very far, but I still pay that money. And so in my hedging consumption thought process, I own shares in oil companies, partially to hedge my consumption there. And recently I was talking to a friend about this, and because he was asking me, he says, what's the thought process in owning oil? Oil's going away forever. And I didn't disagree with him, but it's like, I spend money to fill up my car every month, and I want that hedge. So, Bob, let me ask you your thoughts on this, because I think it's a really interesting, I don't want to call it limitation, because it has worked for me. My oil stocks have slowly gone up over time. And I mean, Imperial Oil is my largest one, and that one's done quite well. But how do you guard against a hedge against something that is changing, like energy consumption, like cars and driving is changing? Is that something that you worry about when you look at these types of companies, or is it just sort of, it's in the future, I'll deal with it then?
Yes and no. Like, we don't, I guess the only oil company we own, not pure oil company, the one we own is Canadian Natural Resources. We used to own companies like Chevron and Suncor and so on, but we have gotten out of those, not because we think oil is going away anytime soon. It's more just trying to get away from them, because these pure oil companies or crude producers, the stock prices are kind of mimic the cyclical nature of crude. Right? So we want to get away from that. But I don't think that's a thing that I worry about, because oil is not going away anytime soon. Even with EV being more prominent, like if you look at electric cars, they're still very, very, very expensive for the most part. Still a luxury toy. And if you need a car and you want a car that's reasonably cost, you almost would end up going with an ICE car, right? Like the regular gas powered car. So I don't think oil is going away anytime soon. And plus, we still use oil for a lot of synthetic type of stuff. So no, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So I'm not too worried about it. Now, you could reduce your exposure to oil, for example, and kind of pivoting a little bit. A lot of people are talking about, the Bell, the Telus, and the Rogers of the world, thinking, oh, satellite is going to kill these telecom companies. But that's so far out in the future. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So again, you could worry and worry about the future, but these companies are not dumb either. They're always evaluating their options and shifting their investment, their way of making money too. So I wouldn't put too much thoughts into, hey, oil is going away soon, so let's not invest in oil at all. I think that's a very short term view. What about you, Nelson?
I want to talk about that thing you mentioned with the internet and satellite internet, because I've never understood that bear argument. Yes, I understand that Starlink and satellite internet exist. I'm not discounting that. I'm not whatever. And I understand that it's a pretty good product for a very small percentage of the population. If you live in rural Canada, if you have a property, if you spend a vacation property and you spend some time there, middle of nowhere, I understand for those people that satellite internet is important, and without it, they basically wouldn't have a high-speed internet, and you basically need high-speed internet to exist in the world in 2025. What I don't understand, and Bob, maybe you can help me out on this, is that how is Starlink going to disrupt internet in the cities when the networks are already there and I'm paying a reasonable cost for this internet that is the cost to provide it is only going to go down over time because the wires are in the ground. Yeah, you have to repair them every now and again or whatever, but the wires are there. So I don't understand why I would switch from this internet that I have and it works and it's fast to something that is just connecting to a satellite that right now costs way more and doesn't really have the same performance. So I've never understood that from a shareholder perspective, that it's like, why would I switch to a worse product that costs more? Do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think people are thinking that Starlink will and these satellite internet companies will take over just simply because their names are out there and it's great to use, like you said, when you're in an area where you don't get cell coverage. But yeah, I think in the city, I don't really see it, especially the speed is not quite on par yet. So yeah, and if you look at the internet providers, if you look at compared to how much you're paying per month, say 10 years ago to what you're paying today, I could probably say with quite a bit of certainty that you're paying just as much, if not more, than what you were paying 10 years ago, even though you're getting maybe a little bit faster speed or even the same amount of speed. Because I feel like the internet providers just keep increasing their prices regardless what kind of speed you're getting. And if you're stuck on the same speed, they could just increase, $5 here and there. You can't really do anything about it. And the satellite internet providers, they can't do that just quite yet. So yeah, I don't see that argument that satellite internet providers are going to take over and just dominate that market. And plus, your cell phones still work. You still need to rely on these telecom companies for your cell phones. So yeah, I just don't see that argument at all. And this is coming from somebody that works I actually work in my full-time job in the cellular business. So, I always wonder about that.
Yeah, I think the bigger risk to investing in the telecoms is on the wireless side, where Canada had 3 national providers and now there's 4 with Quebecor getting into that. And that's the danger, is that this new competitor doing the exact same thing is driving prices down. But at the same time, you look at the wired internet side of it. Well, like you said, like prices are slowly going up over time. And if you're a telecom company that is looking to maybe stop the bleeding from the wireless prices going down or being pressured, what do? Well, you take a look at this other part of your business and you say, how am I going to be able to increase the price here? And as long as you're reasonable in the marketplace, and as long as kind of the competitors in your market are doing the same thing, and I mean, they all are motivated by the same thing, so they are doing the same thing, then it's a winning strategy that should continue to work over time. And it just goes to illustrate how important it is to hedge that consumption by owning the underlying stock, because when your internet goes up $5 a month, I think it's far less painful to deal with when you have shares of your internet provider versus whether if you don't, then it's, naked greed. And if you do, it's, well, at least everyone else is getting hosed by the same thing, and you get to feel okay as a shareholder in doing that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just happened, I think I mentioned about TELUS. My TELUS phone bill went up by $5 a few months ago. And I was like, what the hell? And I called them and they were like, oh yeah, we mentioned about that, 6 months ago in your cell phone bill that we're going to increase by $5 to, I think they may have mentioned it was for quality of service. And I was like, oh, that's a bunch of BS. And I managed to get $5 back eventually after kind of threatening them a little bit. But at the same time, kind of laughing because as a TELUS shareholder, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. They could get $5 extra from their clients. Right? It's kind of similar to banks too. Like they could just increase their monthly fee by $1 or $2, or they increase the minimum balance that you need to keep in your checking account, so they waive your monthly fees. It's like they win either way. So if you own the underlying stock, at least you're kind of recouping that reward per se. So it kind of shifts your mentality a little bit. And again, that goes back to my original comment about if you absolutely hate dealing with these companies, that kind of makes you, if you own these underlying stocks, it makes it a little bit easier to swallow the increase in price.
I love the sort of switching your mentality part of this, because I think that's so incredibly important. I think back to friends, colleagues, acquaintances, whatever. One of the things that kind of holds us all together is complaining about how much things cost and how much things have gone up and so on. And for me, I like to use it as a little bit of like an educational tool. Whenever someone complains to me about how their whatever utility bill is ridiculous, their insurance is ridiculous, whatever, I say to them, it's like, well, it sounds like this is a pretty good investment. Why don't you own shares in it? And it accomplishes a couple of things. And the first thing is that it generally kind of shuts them up, which is good, because I don't think that the complaining is a very good use of our time just in general. But secondly is you sort of see this kind of jolt of recognition almost on it's like, hey, why don't I own shares in the power company? And then at that point you have to explain where it's like, here in Edmonton, you can't really own shares in the power company, but you can own shares in Capital Power, which owns the power plants, which sell the electricity to the locally owned utility. Or you can buy Fortis, or you can buy Canadian Utilities or whatever, which gets you the same exposure, blah, 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 blah. And it's just this mentality of, hey, you don't have to take this. You can own a piece of this and feel a little bit better about these increases, about how much your bill costs. And, ultimately, a lot of people don't take me up on it because, one, they don't know how to invest. And two, is that if they do know how to invest, well, who wants to invest in the boring power company when I can invest in some high flying tech stock or, whatever. But it does create that ability to have that conversation, and that hopefully that kind of clicks for people at some point. It's that Charlie Munger philosophy of inverting your thinking, of taking something that brings you pain or brings you discomfort and switching up that thought process, which I think is probably the most valuable part of the whole thing. As much as it's great to own enough Enbridge shares that it pays for your gas bill, I think that mentality shift is what's really important.
Yeah, 100% agree with you here, Nelson. And I think one thing is also it allows you to have a relatively simple way to look at investments. I think, and I'm guilty of that sometimes, and I'm sure Nelson, you are as well. Like when you overcomplicate the analysis, that's when you get yourself in trouble more often than not. And if you could keep things simpler, be better, right? And again, I was like, I have kids, so I always reference, like, my analogy is that if you can't explain to a 5-year-old, then you need to really see how you could dumb it down. And if you really can't explain to a 5-year-old, then maybe you shouldn't be owning this investment. Like, and again, that's this consumption idea is so powerful because you could easily explain to a 5-year-old why you own, Fortis or Capital Power or TD or Metro or Costco for that sake. They can understand because they're like, oh, we're shopping at Costco, then that makes sense to buy Costco stocks because when Costco makes money, then we get money too. So it's very, very straightforward and simple when you look at it that way.
I view complicated investment analysis as a series of coin flips. And by doing that, I think that for me anyway, it really helped me embrace a simplistic mindset, because you look at something where it's like, okay, you've got a investment, X has to work, and then Y has to work, and then Z has to work in order for it to work out. Maybe it's a high growth company where it's like, okay, this has to continue to keep growing. It has to continue to trade at a high multiple, and it has to continue to have investors love it. And if you don't get each of those things to happen, then the stock is going to fall. So assuming there's a 50-50 chance of each thing happening, which I'm not sure is the case because handicapping these things are hard, but let's just be simple here and assume there's a 50-50 chance of each of those things happening. Okay, so the first coin flip, 50% yes, 50% no. So then the second coin flip, then you have a 25% chance of getting both those coin flips right. And then the third coin flip is 12.5%. And then it just goes on, it gets lower and lower from there. And I started looking at investments from that perspective, where it's like, okay, if I have to get 3 coin flips right in a row, and these coin flips, even if they're weighted in my favor, even if they're a 60-40 weighting or 70-30 weighting, by the time you get all 3 to go in your favor, your odds at that point become quite low. And from that perspective, it's like, well, I'm not sure if this investment is going to work out. Where if your coin flip, your 50-50 coin flip is people are going to continue to pay their gas bill or continue to pay their power bill or continue to pay their insurance, and the insurance company is going to have the ability to push through price increases as they have for the last billion years. I think that that's a much easier bet to make, and there's less room for error there. You're obviously not going to bat 1,000. Nobody does. But if you minimize your chances for error, that's a good thing, in my view.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good way to sum up why this is an effective way to invest.
And I think too, it comes down to every time you make a decision, there's the possibility that decision will go wrong. And that's part of the reason why I embraced this long-term view, is because every time you buy, you make a decision, and every time you sell, you make a decision. And selling, I think, is the much more difficult of the two decisions. So if you just make buy decisions all the time, then you're also increasing your chances of being successful. And you're eliminating a sell decision that could be very, very bad. And when you buy something, your downside, 100%, like it either can go to 0 and that's it. But if you sell something too early, you could miss out on multiple 100% gains in doing that. So I think that sell decision, that just minimizing your decisions too in general, is a really powerful concept that made me a better investor. And, getting back to the hedging your consumption part of it, is if you embrace the fact that you're going to have a gas bill for the rest of your life, then you might as well have a mentality to own Enbridge shares for the rest of your life. And this should be a acceptable outcome. There's just one decision there. That decision is, I want to hedge my consumption. Okay, great. Now I don't have to do anything for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And yeah, and just kind of talking about the selling decision, it's hard to sell. Like if you sell too early, you lose. You may exit when you don't really make that much money, or you miss a big jump. And when people talk about, oh, you could have, like a lot you see these articles on, oh, if you were bought $1,000 worth of Google stocks when they first went IPO, or $1,000 of Apple stock when iPhone first came out, you could be millionaire, blah 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 blah. But that's always assuming you never sold these shares, and quite often not. People end up selling because they're constantly making these coin flips. And yeah, like selling decisions, I think, and I agree with you, Nelson, it's way, way harder than buying decisions. And that's why I don't like to sell stocks. I would rather buy stocks and average our cost basis up than selling stocks and then having to jump back in again because we made the wrong selling decision. But maybe that's another episode for another time.
I think we should cover this in another episode, because I have a great story of a certain stock. I'll tease it here a little bit. I want to spoil it so we can get people to listen to the episode that we'll do in the future. But I have a stock that I looked at buying and I didn't, and it went up. I think it's about a 20 bagger buy now. This is a number of years ago, and it's just it's the biggest investment mistake that I made, because this one, it would have done so well for me that it would have sort of paled in comparison to everything else. And it wasn't a sexy tech stock or anything. It's a boring blue chip that we've all heard of and we all know. And for me, it's like, I know that I would have screwed this up by selling it, like 19 years ago, because I didn't know anything back then. So I think that's the important part, is that this hedging your consumption, it creates that long-term mindset. And the long-term mindset is one of the few ways that a individual investor can win versus hedge funds and all these guys who have all these data and all these smart guys who are working for them. All we have is limited resources compared to them. And yet I think that the individual investor can do just as well by focusing on really simple stuff, avoiding fees, taking a long-term approach, and just generally not being stupid. And I think that's what hedging your consumption really is it's just simple, and it minimizes the chances of mistakes. We talked in a previous episode about our investing mistakes, and you really minimize your mistakes if you just keep things simple and have a strategy that you can replicate over the long term. That's what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think we're probably about out of time here today. So, Bob, once again, another great episode. Of course, we're going to think all the episodes are great because we're doing them, but hopefully you guys listening are enjoying these. Maybe let us know on Twitter, in the comments, whatever. If you're enjoying the episodes, kind of what we can improve, what we might be doing good, what might be doing badly, and just give us some feedback. Maybe too, we'll go on social media too and ask some questions. We'll do some future episodes of kind of answering your questions. So, Bob, any last thoughts?
No, I think it's always fun talking and coming up with future podcast ideas. I think we could just keep talking, but of course we want to end these episodes within an hour or so. So until next time, and certainly let us know if you have any comments, and so we could improve.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe to never miss another episode. For more from Bob, visit his site at tawcan.com. That's TAWCAN, all one word. Nelson can be found at CanadianDividendInvesting.com. They're both on Twitter as well. Just search for Tawcan or CDI Newsletter. Thanks. See you next time.